Hey guys, Derek here, and today I wanted to go over some wiring pointers for the T-Rex 700X electric model that has just recently been released. As I went over in my previous 700X improvement video, there's been quite a few changes to the overall frame layout with this particular model. Because of this, I wanted to show you a few areas where you should pay attention to how you route your servo wires in order to both have a neat and clean wiring setup for your model, as well as to eliminate any chance of the wires rubbing or chafing along either the carbon fiber or against the main gear or some other area on the frame. So without further ado, let's get into these pointers. One of the first things I want to go over is routing the cyclic servo wires on the 700X. There's a few different options for running the wires from the servo located in the rear portion of the frame here all the way up to your flybarless unit wherever you may have that mounted. While one option is certainly to run the servo wires on the exterior of the frame and run them over the servo and take advantage of some of the holes that Align has placed in the sides of the frames here to use zip ties to hold them and that sort of thing, it does not offer a very pleasant cosmetic appearance. So the best option in my opinion is to route the servo wires inside the frames, which when done correctly will both protect them and allow for the model to have a very clean look. So the first thing here is going to be to route the servo lead through the rubber grommet that is included in the T-Rex 700X kit. This will protect the servo from any type of chafing against the carbon fiber of the frame, so make sure you put that rubber grommet in there and you run your servo lead through this hole. Once we have the servo lead routed through the rubber grommet in the frame, you can go ahead and run it along the inside of the carbon fiber here, over the top of the middle bearing block. And I like to use a zip tie to secure it in place right here and take advantage of these zip tie mounting holes located on the side of the frame. And from there we're going to route it underneath of the motor mount. And if you look closely here, you can see a little bit of the servo cable inside of this cutout of the frame here. So what I've done is used, again, some of that 3M mounting tape that we looked at earlier, and I've placed a strip of it on the inside of the frame here. Then I've taken the backing off and I've stuck the servo lead up against the tape and as high as possible so that it is up against the motor mount. And this 3M tape here is pretty important as it ensures that the servo lead won't droop down and hit the main gear, which is something we really want to avoid. Obviously if the servo lead drops into your main gear, it's going to chew it up in flight and the end result will not be too good. So the routing is pretty straightforward. We can go ahead and route the servo through this portion of the frame. Again, I've taken advantage of one of the extra holes here to place a zip tie to hold the servo lead. And then from there, it's going to depend on your exact flybarless unit layout. So moving on to the left side of the frame here, we have our other aileron/pitch servo as well as the elevator servo. This servo here will be routed the exact same way as on the right side of the frame that we looked at previously. So for this segment of the video, I want to focus on the elevator servo. So much like the aileron servo, we're going to route the servo lead through the rubber grommet here along the inside of the frame. It's going to drop down and take advantage of this rear zip tie location here, and it's going to pass along with this servo's lead through the top of the middle bearing block, and then it's going to get secured by this zip tie. And then here is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Rather than route both servo leads through the inside of the frame down in this carbon fiber portion here, I actually route the elevator servo along the top outer edge here of the lower motor. And what this does is, because there's a limited amount of space here between the bottom of the motor mount and the top of the main gear, there's really only enough room to have one servo wire pass through here and still have plenty of clearance between the servo wire and the top of the main gear here. If you try to stuff both servo wires in here, in my opinion, there is not enough of a gap between the main gear and the servo lead wire to avoid the risk of chafing. So if you stick to running the aileron pitch servo lead down here by itself, as high up and away from the main gear as possible, you can then route the elevator servo gear around the motor as I've done here. And this works because the side plates for the motor, as you can see here, have a nice pocket machined into them. So when you go ahead and put this on, that little pocket there actually provides room for the servo lead to kind of bulge out and then to exit in the front portion of the side plate here. So this is how I would recommend routing your elevator servo.
One of the more prominent features on the 700X is the red injection molded plastic that has been embedded into the carbon fiber frame. And this serves not only as a means to attach the lower frame section to the upper frame section, but also acts as a conduit for the tail servo wire. So as you can see here, I'm zoomed in on our tail servo, and we have the servo pigtail routed through the slot cut out here in the servo bracket portion of the frame, and then that is then run through the space provided inside of the frame here. So you can see I have it tucked between that rib and the rail for our battery tray. I have some additional tape securing it into the plastic right there. And if we keep moving along, we have it secured again using some more tape right there in the red portion of the frame. Now what I've done here deviates a little bit from the manual. In order to ensure that the servo wire does not lie in the path of the battery tray, I've gone ahead and drilled an additional hole here in the frame. And I actually took the connector off the end of my tail servo, and I placed a piece of heat shrink over it that I shrunk down. And then I routed that through the frame here so that I have a bit of heat shrink between the servo cable and the frame. And what this does is keeps the wire well away from the battery rail so that when we install our batteries, we're not hitting the tail servo wire at all, and keeps it routed away from that area. So just a little tip to maybe help you neaten up your tail servo wiring and make sure that it is not in the path of your battery tray.